husband barked, his face twisted in rage while his entire family nodded in smug agreement. They thought they had finally broken me. They expected me to fall to my knees, weep, and beg for forgiveness for a truth I refused to hide. But as I looked into the eyes of the man I'd loved for 6 years, something inside me shifted forever. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply looked at my 3-year-old son, grabbed his hand, and walked out the door. Less than 3 hours later, we were sitting at the international airport terminal with 2 one-way tickets in hand. By the time my husband and his family realized we hadn't just left the house, but had left the entire country, their smug smiles completely vanished, and they went pale when My name is Elena. I am 34 years old, and until exactly 48 hours ago, I believe my life was defined by the roles of a loyal wife and a dedicated mother. For 6 long years, I poured everything I had into my marriage with David. When we first met, he was ambitious, charismatic, and seemingly full of warmth. I fell completely in love with his vision for the future, so much so that I willingly made the ultimate sacrifice. I walked away from my own burgeoning corporate career to help manage and grow his family's retail logistics business. But love has a strange way of blinding you to reality. Once the initial honeymoon phase faded, the cracks began to show. I quickly realized I wasn't just David's wife. To his family, I was merely an unpaid, disposable outsider. My mother-in-law, a master of passive-aggressive remarks, never missed an opportunity to criticize how I managed our household or how I dressed. David's older brother, an arrogant man who handled the company's finances, treated me like a glorified assistant rather than a key contributor who kept their operations running smoothly. Instead of standing up for me, David consistently chose the path of least resistance. He would pat my shoulder in private, whispering that his family didn't mean it and that I just needed to be more patient. For years, I swallowed my pride, hid my frustration, and stayed quiet for the sake of our beautiful 3-year-old son, Leo. But the quiet before the storm was about to end. The breaking point arrived on a humid Saturday evening during a massive family celebration. David's parents were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary, and the grand dining room was packed with over 40 guests, including close friends, extended relatives, and the company's most valuable corporate investors. I had spent the entire week coordinating the catering, organizing the venue, and ensuring every single detail was flawless, all while trying to keep up with a highly energetic 3-year-old. I thought tonight would be a rare moment of peace, but I had no idea I was walking straight into a meticulously orchestrated ambush. Right as the main course was being served, David's brother stood up, clinking his glass to demand everyone's attention. But instead of delivering a toast to his parents, his expression darkened as he looked directly across the long table at me. In a loud, echoing voice, he falsely accused me of completely mismanaging a major shipping contract, a crucial deal that had fallen through earlier that morning due to his own negligence. Within seconds, my mother-in-law chimed in, loudly lamenting how my incompetence was actively ruining the family's hard-earned legacy. The entire room went dead silent, dozens of eyes drilling into me with intense judgment. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I turned to David, desperately expecting him to defend me, to speak the truth, or at least ask his brother to take the conversation offline. Instead, David didn't even look me in the eye. To protect his own public standing and save face in front of the investors, he nodded in agreement, completely validating their public humiliation of his own wife. The moment the last guest departed, the heavy silence exploded into a screaming match behind the closed doors of our home. David's face was twisted with an unfamiliar, venomous rage as he threw his jacket onto the couch. "How could you embarrass my family like that?" he shouted, completely flipping the reality of what had just happened. I stared at him, utterly shell-shocked by his sheer delusion. "They lied about me in front of everyone, David. Your brother ruined that contract, not me," I countered, my voice trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and fierce anger. He stepped closer, his eyes cold and entirely devoid of the warmth I had married. "I don't care about your excuses," David snapped, crossing his arms tightly. "My family's reputation is everything. You will call my mother and my brother right now. apologize for your behavior, and accept the blame, or you can pack your bags and get out of my house." He didn't wait for my answer. Assuming his harsh ultimatum would force me into submission, David grabbed his car keys and drove away to spend the night at a hotel, confidently leaving me alone to think about what I'd done. As the sound of his car faded down the driveway, a strange, profound clarity washed over me. The weeping woman he expected to break down didn't exist anymore. Before I tell you the shocking secret I uncovered in David's desk that watching from so I can see how far our journey has reached. I stood up, walked directly into his home office, and prepared to change the rules of the game entirely. I originally walked into David's home office, just looking for a marriage certificate and Leo's birth certificate, but as I searched through the bottom drawer of his desk, my fingers brushed against a heavy, locked metal lockbox. David had always kept the key hidden inside a hollowed-out book on the adjacent shelf. With shaking hands, I retrieved the key, unlocked the box, and began pulling out stacks of financial statements and legal documents. As I scanned the pages under the dim desk lamp, the horrible truth finally came to light. The thriving family business that David and his brother boasted about wasn't built on their own brilliant business acumen. The documents clearly proved that David had secretly funneled away my entire personal inheritance, funds left to me by my late grandparents that were supposed to be locked in a joint savings account for our future, to prop up their failing logistics company. They had been using my money to fund their lavish lifestyles while treating me like a second-class citizen. A cold, fierce determination replaced the last lingering pieces of my heartbreak. I realized right then that I owed this pathetic man and his toxic family absolutely nothing. I sat down at the computer, opened my private, untouched bank account that my father had set up for me years ago, and unhesitatingly booked 2 one-way international flights back to my native country. I packed 2 suitcases with our essential clothing, packed Leo's favorite stuffed animal, and quietly walked out of the house into the cool night air, leaving my old life behind forever. The terminal at the international airport was quiet and bathed in the harsh, sterile glow of the overhead fluorescent lights. It was just past 4 in the morning. I held my 3-year-old son, Leo, tightly against my chest, his small head resting heavily on my shoulder as he drifted back to sleep. My heart was pounding so violently against my ribs that I was genuinely terrified the passengers standing near us in the check-in line could hear it. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting David or his brother to burst through the glass, sliding doors of the terminal to stop us. But the airport remained calm, and I took a deep breath, looking down at my sweet boy's face as I realized we were finally on the verge of escaping this nightmare. When the gate agent finally handed me our boarding passes, a massive wave of relief washed over me. We boarded the plane, buckled into our seats, and as the aircraft lifted off the runway and soared high into the dark clouds, I turned off my phone completely. For the next 14 hours, I stared out the tiny window at the endless expanse of the ocean below, feeling the massive physical distance growing between my son and the toxic environment we left behind. The moment the plane finally touched down on the tarmac of my native country, safely across the world, I walked into the arrival terminal and switched my phone back on. The screen instantly lit up, freezing for a few seconds under the sheer volume of notifications. There were 30 missed calls and over 100 text messages from David. The early messages from the morning were arrogant and demanding, filled with phrases like, "You've thrown your tantrum. Now get back here and apologize." But as the hours ticked by and he checked our home to find our clothes gone, the tone completely shifted. The most recent texts were pure, unadulterated panic. He had finally checked my location tracking, only to realize I was thousands of miles away, completely outside of his reach. The true climax of my plan hadn't occurred at the airport terminal. It happened the exact moment I opened my laptop during our layover. Before boarding that final flight, I had sent a single, heavily encrypted email to the state regulatory authorities, the Federal Tax Commission, and the company's 3 primary corporate investors. Inside that email was a neatly organized, fully documented folder containing every piece of evidence I had copied from David's hidden lockbox. It included the clear financial proof of his brother's systematic tax fraud, their illegal offshore shell companies, and the blatant corporate embezzlement they had used to keep their failing logistics business afloat. They had spent years manipulating the system, but they never expected the quiet wife they publicly humiliated to be the one who meticulously handed over the keys to their destruction. As I walked out of the international baggage claim, my phone began ringing aggressively. This time, I chose to answer. The arrogant, commanding husband who had given me a cruel ultimatum just a day ago was completely gone. Instead, David was openly weeping, his voice shaking so violently I could barely understand him. "Elena, please, you have to withdraw the reports," he begged, all his pride entirely shattered. "The investors just pulled all their capital. The bank has frozen our corporate accounts, and federal investigators are at the office right now." He frantically explained that his family was facing instant, total financial bankruptcy and imminent criminal charges. They went completely pale when they realized that my sudden departure wasn't just an emotional retreat. It was a calculated, devastating strike that stripped them of their wealth, their reputation, and their freedom overnight. David pleaded with me to fly back, promising that he would force his entire family to publicly apologize to me on their knees if I'd just saved them. I listened to his desperate cries for a few cold seconds, smiled to myself, and hung up the phone without saying a single word. 6 months have passed since that fateful night, and my life has transformed in ways I never thought possible. I am back in my native country, living in a beautiful, sunlit apartment near the coast. Leo is thriving. He spends his afternoons playing in the sand, his laughter filling the spaces that used to be crowded with tension and fear. My divorce from David was finalized last month on my own terms, and with the help of an international legal team, I successfully recovered every single dollar of the inheritance money he had stolen from me. As for David and his family, their downfall was swift and absolute. The logistics business completely collapsed under the weight of the federal investigation. His brother was forced to sign a plea deal to avoid heavy prison time, while David had to sell his house and his luxury cars just to pay off the outstanding corporate debts and legal fees. My former mother-in-law now lives in a tiny, rented one-bedroom apartment, stripped of the grand social status she used to value more than human decency. They wanted to make me homeless, but in the end, their own greed left them with nothing. What would you have done if your husband gave you a cruel ultimatum like that? Would you have stayed, or would you have packed your bags like I did? Let me know where the truth always wins and the villains face ultimate justice. I am leaving 2 other incredible